بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وحكمة وهدى. أما بعد، فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Honorable brothers in Islam, sisters in Islam, I welcome you to tonight's short talk on the heroes of Islam, the vanguards of this religion, those great heroes who breathed life into the Ummah. Whenever there was a challenge facing the Ummah, Allah sent these people, as Sheikh Abdul Hassan al-Nadwi said, they gave a blood transfusion to give life to the Ummah. So we spoke previously about Salahuddin Ayyubi, that great Kurdish commander who liberated Jerusalem. That was in the 13th century. And shortly after that, we have another hero who rose up, not to face the Crusaders, but to face the Mongols, the Tatar. Not only challenging them with jihad fi sabilillah, fighting in the way of Allah, but through knowledge and protecting the religion at a time. This is the 13th, 14th century, 800 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 8th century, 661, he was born, and there was a lot of corruption creeping and affecting the Ummah from different various groups, Greek philosophy, different sects were forming, different innovations were cropping into the Ummah. So our hero, he came about in this climate when the Mongols were attacking. They took over Damascus, and we'll talk about it. So our hero, he was born in the year 661 Hijri in a place called Haran. Haran is a city today. It's kind of in the middle of three big countries, or three or four different countries, between Iraq, Syria, they say part of Arabia, even part of Turkey and those areas. Haran is a very old city. I visited the city there. They say that Ibrahim alayhi salam passed through it. And very ancient, very beautiful city. And our hero was born there. His name is Ahmed ibn Halim ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He's also given the nickname Taqiyuddin. Taqiyuddin, the piety of the religion, although he didn't like this name, subhanAllah. So Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he was one of the great scholars. When he was born in Haran, but his father fled the Mongol Tatar invasion, and he brought him to Damascus. Damascus, as you know today, is in the news. It's one of the great cities of Islam. And he learned a lot at the scholars there, and he left a tremendous legacy over there. His family were scholars. His father and his grandfather was also known as a great scholar. His grandfather was also known as one of the great scholars of the land, and his father. He was known for his keen intelligence and sharp memory. And at a young age, only 19 years old, he began to teach and give fatwa. By the time he was 21, he was appointed as one of the headmasters, the hadith masters and teachers. He was given also the title Hafid. Now, a lot of times today, what is a Hafid? We say, who's a Hafid? Somebody who memorized Qur'an. That actually in the past, all the students had to do Hifz of Qur'an. They were all Hafid. But a Hafid was somebody who memorized hadith. And usually they said 100,000 hadith. It's very, very high status, subhanAllah, with the chains of narrators. So one of the most famous maybe you've heard of, is Al-Hafid. He's given the title, the Hafid. His name is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. But also here, Ibn Taymiyyah, he was given that title because he mastered the sciences of hadith, what is authentic, what is weak, and he was able to recall it so fast. So his contemporaries, the ulama, they said, we never saw anybody who could remember a hadith so quickly. Where is it found, in which book, what is the chain? And he said, as if he was looking at the book in front of his eyes, and as if he could, he could see the knowledge in front of his eyes. Subhanallah, Allah gave him this brilliant memory, and he was also not only a scholar of fiqh, he also studied astronomy, history, math. He was a polymath, they call it, means he had many sciences. Subhanallah. And he was reached the level of ijtihad, somebody who can derive the rulings because he has so much knowledge. But he was also courageous, and he fought the Mongols. And there's a famous story where he went to Kazan, the leader of the Mongols, and he criticized him. He said, you came to Damascus, you're killing Muslim blood, you claim to be a Muslim. The Mongols, some of them claimed to be Muslim, but they drank alcohol, they used to. So he criticized him to the extent that the other ulama that went with him started walking away from him, like stepping back, and he's in the front, because they were afraid the blood was going to spill. Because the Mongols are very violent. So Kazan, he listened, and he liked what he heard. Ibn Taymiyyah said, fear Allah, you're a Muslim, you shouldn't harm the Muslim. So Kazan, he listened, and he said, take him back in an entourage, bring him back to Damascus, take care of him. The other so-called scholars and leaders who shied away, they went back and they got robbed. So look at it. The person who speaks the truth, Allah honored him. Subhanallah. He was very strong against innovations, and he would really be good in debating. But one thing that does is you earn sometimes enemies. When you prove, people wrong, sometimes it earns enemies. And so he had to go through a lot of trials because the people of his time, they accused him of certain things. They said that he was making anthropomorphism with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time he went to court, he would argue and he would convince the judges. They would let him go. Or even the scholars he debated, they would become admirers of him, subhanAllah. Then they brought another accusation. They said, you make a ruling on divorce, that the 3 times divorce you counted as one. And he said this was the fatwa of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Abu Bakr in the first few years of Umar. So he was trying to prevent the nikah muhallil. What happened now, people used to divorce 3 times, then go hire somebody, and it was a very shameful thing. So he made this ijtihad based on his knowledge, and Allah knows best. So that was another issue they imprisoned him for. Seems like a very trivial issue, but of course, when politics gets involved, he was put in prison. Another issue he believed in is that people should not travel on a journey to attend to a grave. No problem visiting the graves. But a person, when they go on the journey, even the Prophet ﷺ said, when you go on a journey, only 3 masjids. You either go to Masjid al-Haram, or Masjid Nabawi, or Masjid al-Aqsa. Otherwise, all the masjids are the same. But what he noticed, people would take certain graves and make pilgrimages to those graves. And he didn't consider this from the Sunnah. He said that the Sunnah is you pass by the grave, you go to visit the masjid, you give salam to the grave, but you shouldn't make it an object of journeying. Just like even the masjids, only those 3 because they have a special virtue, as we all know. The Masjid al-Haram, 100,000. Masjid Nabawi, how many? I think the hadith is 500, I believe. 1,000? And Masjid al-Aqsa, I believe is 500 or 100, subhanAllah. May Allah let us pray in all of them, inshallah, after the free Masjid al-Aqsa, inshallah. So he used to, his enemies, they would plot against him, but look at his iman. I hope we can capture this. He said, what can my enemies do to me? If they kill me, alhamdulillah, I'm a shaheed. I'm not doing anything wrong. If they send me traveling, if they kick me out, then I'll travel fi sabilillah. I'll be traveling fi sabilillah. Then they said, they used to, at that time, send people to Cyprus. That was a punishment. So he said, if they send me to Cyprus, I'll give dawah to the people of Cyprus. No problem. If they put me in prison, then I have the solace with Allah. And he said, I would be so happy because my Jannah is in my chest. If my Jannah is in my chest, what can they do to me? They can't take it away from me. I'm here, I'm reading Qur'an, I'm in dhikr of Allah. I get to be alone with Allah. What's the problem? They put me in prison. So he used to have such strong iman. And when they put him in prison in the end of his life, there was a citadel around the Umayyad Masjid in Damascus, where he lived. They put him in one of the towers. And he used to tell his students, they used to come to the window or visit him, One of his students, his name is Ibn al-Qayyim. Ibn al-Qayyim, a great scholar of the heart. So he said, the world became so depressed and we became so constrained and sad. So we went and visited our Shaykh. The minute we saw him, we became relieved and happy because we saw how happy he was. He said, we never saw somebody more happy than him. Imagine a free person, he's going to the prison to get happiness. So he said we would go to the Shaykh and he would, the minute we saw him, we would feel relieved and feel happy. And the Shaykh, he said, Ibn Taymiyyah said, I swear if my enemies were to give me this citadel made out of gold bricks, they could not give me the happiness I'm feeling with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave me the whole, it's a big castle, heavy bricks. He said it would not make me more happy than I am with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he said that he never saw anybody with a more joyful soul or a person who was less worried. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, what he used to do, his habit, he was very into dhikr of Allah. He would sit from Fajr all the way until sunrise, not talking to anybody, doing dhikr. His students would wait for him. And he would wait for the sun to rise, and then he would start teaching. He would pray his ishraq, and then he would teach. And he said, this is my morning breakfast. If I don't have my morning breakfast, I lose my power. So he used to love to do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say he had 41 male teachers and 4 female teachers. Even somebody of this caliber, there were female teachers of those times, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of his students is a Maqdisi, one of his teachers, and they say you can judge his caliber by his students. Listen to the names, maybe you might hear some of these names of his students to show you what kind of Imam he was. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, whose books are very, very famous. Imam al-Dhahabi. Imam al-Dhahabi, he wrote the big volume of the biographies of the righteous people, 50 volumes. Imam al-Mizzi, famous scholar. Imam Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir, the one who wrote the tafsir of the Qur'an, his student. Also, Imam al-Bazzar. Bazzar has a book of hadith. Ibn al-Wardi. Ibn al-Wardi was wrote beautiful poetry. The scholars, they praised him. We don't have too much time, but just a few of the praises. Imam al-Dhahabi, he said that Ibn Taymiyyah, in any issue of difference of opinion, he knew all the evidences. So he could make the ijtihad, the correct ruling. And he never saw anybody who was faster in remembering the texts. And the sunnah was on the tip of his tongue. Like he would just remember it. And he was from the signs of Allah in knowing the foundations and the different issues. They gathered his fatwa and all his writings in 300 volumes. 300 volumes. Just one book of his is like 50, 60 volumes. I used to have it in the Tyler Masjid. Take 2 bookshelves. There's one of his books, subhanAllah. So 300 volumes of his knowledge he used to write. And he was very not afraid to speak the truth. And he would be so pious in his supplications. And Imam al-Dhahabi says, but he was not infallible. Any scholar can make some mistakes. I do differ with him in some issues, big and minor issues. See, even with such a great scholar, Imam al-Dhahabi, his teacher, but he said he's not fanatical. He does have some mistakes, but he was very courageous. And if he was just a little bit more gentle, everybody would have loved him. Nobody would have been his enemies, but he was a little bit, a little bit tough. And this is something beautiful I loved. He said, he glorified the laws of Allah outwardly and inwardly. So he had that love for the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he passed away, they said 50,000 people came to Damascus to attend. The markets were empty. And everybody came, except a few of his enemies, they hid because they were afraid of the crowds. SubhanAllah. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the great scholar from Gaza. Asqalan is Gaza today. That great scholar who wrote the Sharh of Sahih Bukhari. He says he's the Shaykh of our Shaykhs. He's the Shaykh of Islam. When he speaks about tafsir, he's the flag. He's the highermost in tafsir. If he speaks about fiqh, he knows the limits. If he speaks about hadith, he's the seed of knowledge. He knows all about the sciences. If he speaks about different sects and religions, he's very meticulous. They said he knew the arguments of the different religions and different sects better than they knew them. He mastered them, just like we have today with Zakir Naik, right? When he debates the non-Muslim, he knows their books better than them. How can you argue with such a person? Subhanallah. That was the way of Ibn Taymiyyah. He would master their books, and then he would be able to give them da'wah and those things. And so Ibn Hajar, he said, but he never saw somebody like himself. Nobody saw anybody like him. He didn't see anybody like himself. Subhanallah. He was mujtahid, but if he made mistakes, then Allah forgives the mistake of a scholar who tries his best. And the way to deal with his views, Ibn Hajar quotes, he says, is isolate his views from the tongues of the people, the innovators or people who speak ill of him. Take his views, ignore what they say. Then if it's correct, accept it, and if it's not correct, then leave it aside. This is the way of the ulama. Don't worry about the people, see what he's saying. Judge him by his saying, not by what people say about him. If it's correct, take it. If it's not, then don't take it. That's the scholarly way of dealing with things. His one student, Ibn Qayyim, is enough proof for him. Imam Ibn Kathir, he says, Imam in tafsir, knowledgeable in fiqh. He was memorized everything he saw, and then he would understand it. He had more knowledge of fiqh than the madahib themselves, scholars of the madahib. He knew their madahib. He was a master of usul, which is how to derive rulings, grammar, and he was a specialty in those fields. However, he can make errors. But what's a drop of mistake in an ocean of knowledge? So, right, you compare it to the good, to the bad. Another thing, Imam al-Mizzi, he said no one had more knowledge than the Book of Allah and the Sunnah. No one followed it more closely. Okay, last thing here. Very beautiful is some of his quotes. What is his knowledge? What did he say? He said, every punishment from Allah is pure justice. And every blessing from Allah is pure mercy and grace. Well, not everything is pure from Allah. Number two, he said, whoever desires everlasting bliss, let him adhere to the threshold of servitude to Allah, ubudiyah. If you get into the habit of ubudiyah, then the good and the bad is like cold and hot. Everybody knows in life, days are hot, days are cold. You get used to it. And you say, it's all from Allah. It's all khair. Subhanallah. It's an inevitable part of life. So you get the sweetness of ubudiyah, which is servitude to Allah. He said, the Lord loves to be loved. Allah loves to be loved. Right? He said, guidance is not attained without knowledge, and good decisions and right direction is not attained without patience. You have to think, be patient. Then you get the rushd. And guidance, you need to learn. We have to have knowledge. One of his most famous, in this world is a paradise. Whoever does not enter it will not enter the paradise of the next world. He said the paradise is knowing Allah, being close to Allah. The one who is imprisoned is the one who is imprisoned from Allah. And the captive is the one whose desires enslave him. I remember I heard Cat Stevens one time, the famous. He said, people asked me, why did he become Muslim? You had everything. Can't even eat a ham sandwich. He said, when I became Muslim, I became free from my desires. I was a slave to my desires. Now I'm only a slave to Allah. So, he understood this. He said, the whole religion is knowledge and action and patience. Because when you act, you need to have patience. He said, if you do not taste the sweetness in an action, in an act of worship, suspect yourself, because Allah is the shakur. If you worship, Allah is going to give you that sweetness. If you don't feel it, then he said, maybe your intention is not right. Because Allah is shakur, which means shakur for Allah, the meaning is that he rewards for every little thing, every good deed. He said, none loves his master more except he doesn't love the objects of this world. And no one decreases in his love of his master except he loves more of the objects of this world. So the heart can only be filled with either Allah or with the love of this world. He said, jihad in the nafs is the foundation for jihad against the disbelievers and hypocrites. You have to start with yourself, then you can spread truth to others. Man never fears anything besides Allah unless it is due to a disease in his heart. Somebody really has tawheed. He knows Allah is to control everything. He won't fear anything. But if he has a weakness, then he gets scared. So he's saying he only fears if his tawheed is not good. Then he said here, when his perfection of tawheed is that there is nothing in the heart except Allah. He loves what Allah loves. He hates what Allah hates. His allegiance is to what Allah loves. His enmity is to what Allah hates. His commanding and prohibiting is what Allah wants. So he said, when the heart is empty, only Allah fills it, and he does everything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A couple more. In this world, remembering Allah is a delight incomparable to anything else. He said, zuhud, asceticism, is to leave anything that harms your afterlife. And worship is to do the things that benefit your afterlife. You know, people talk about zuhud. Zuhud is not abandoning the dunya. Sometimes most of the imams, they had work and they had wealth, but leaving anything that harms your akhirah. You can be in your work, but in the dhikr of Allah, earning halal, getting a big reward from Allah. But things that harm your akhirah, the zuhud is staying away from anything that does that. He said, sins are like chains that prevent the heart from reaching the garden of Tawheed and taking from the fruits of the righteous deeds. Sins are like chains. How can the heart fly in the sky of Ubudiyah, of Tawheed, when they're chained down by the sins, the things and the desires of this world? Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah passed away in the year 728 after Hijrah. After they took away his notebook and his pen. They didn't let him read, so they left him. He couldn't do his work. So shortly after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away his life. And even the governors, the markets, they closed. And one last thing I want to share with you. SubhanAllah, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, even though he died, he passed away how many years ago? 700 years ago. He's still having a huge impact on the world today. In the Ivy League universities in America, they have many people doing doctorate degrees on the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, on one book, on one pamphlet. You know, the Sheikh Yasser Qadi, he did his whole PhD on one book, the reconciling between knowledge and revelation. He did his whole 4 years just on one book. Today, in many universities, they're looking for his works, trying to understand the problems of today. And his one fatwa, they made a conference, it's called the Mardin Conference. The Mardin Conference, when the Mongols took over the city of Mardin, and they called themselves Muslim, but they weren't really Muslim. So Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, people asked him, how do we deal with these Mongols? They claim to be Muslim, but they drink, they don't follow any of the laws of Allah, they killed the Muslim. So Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, Mardin is not Darul Harb, and it's not Darul Islam. It's something in between. So he said, do what the rights for the Muslims, what they deserve, and fulfill the rulers, do the rights that they deserve, but you can live with them peacefully. So he gave this kind of balanced fatwa. He said, if you can leave, it's good, but you don't have to, because you can practice your religion. So the scholars today, they found this very useful for how we live in the West. He said, we live here, the rulers are not Muslim, but you can practice your religion. You're allowed to live here as long as you can practice your religion. You do the rights to your Muslim brothers, and you deal with the rulers as you have to. You don't have to fight against them. You can live with them peacefully. And subhanAllah, somehow, one letter in the fatwa was mistyped. And instead of saying yu'amalun, it said yuqatilun. SubhanAllah. Because of that one typo, some people they took this and misinterpreted it. They attributed to Ibn Taymiyyah what he didn't say. He said, deal with the rulers in a good way. Then they translated it, fight the rulers in a good way. SubhanAllah. So it's important to have ulama. They, alhamdulillah, they cross-referenced it and they found the correct answer, inshallah. May Allah have mercy on our Shaykh, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. You can see somebody who spent his life, never got married, subhanAllah, always busy in the da'wah and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anybody have any comments, questions? Inshallah. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. No comments, huh? Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Oh Allah, please accept from us. Oh Allah, help us to understand your religion. Oh Allah, revive our youth, revive our hearts, bring the heroes of Islam to life in our character. Oh Allah, help our brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Gaza, in Sudan, in Bangladesh, in Kashmir, in Syria, in every land, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, unite the hearts of the Muslims, unite the Ummah. Ya Allah, repel the evil from this Ummah, just like you repelled the Crusaders and the Mongols, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Oh Allah, bless this masjid, give healing to our family, have mercy on the mother, our brother Ali, have mercy on all the parents, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wallahu a'lam. Allah, jazakallah khair.